The Jimmy Barrett Show continues on KPRC 950.
All right, I'm wondering, with these new recommendations from the CDC on masks, how is this going to impact people going back to work or your workplace or your ability to go ahead and stay at home? Because I know some of you don't want to go back to work. You want to stay at home. Listen, I can relate to that to a certain extent. That's why I do this afternoon show from my home. I do the morning show from the studios, but I do the afternoon show from home. And there's one reason why I do it from home, and one reason only. I don't have to make a 40-mile drive between the Galleria and just south of the Woodlands, Texas, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, with everybody else is trying to slug their way home. I get the commute part of it, but at some point in time, don't you really need to get back to the office? Don't you really need to meet face-to-face with the boss? Aren't you tired of looking at your co-workers on a Zoom meeting computer? That part gets old after a while, at least in my world. Anyway, here to talk about all this, Spencer O'Leary. He's a remote workplace expert at ActiveOps. Is the name of the company, ActiveOps.com, by the way. Spencer, welcome for the first time to our show. Glad to have you, sir.
Hi,
How
Jimmy.
much pushback are you getting from people about going back to work?
So we're seeing a lot of pushback from people going back to the office to work. And I think your introduction here, you're embracing the real hybrid work that seems to be the new phase that we're starting to see both organizations and some employees demand of their employers. And that hybrid work model of taking the positives of working from home, less distraction, ability to get through my work. At ActiveOps, we provide some software to help businesses measure how productive people are working from home. And we're seeing an increase in production when people, as I say, reduce those distractions. But it's the other metrics that you started to allude to that are worrying. Things like employee well-being, not having that social interaction with their colleagues. Things like innovation and creativity dropping because we're all working alone from home. So your working model, that hybrid, I've gone in the office this morning and I'm working from home this afternoon. We see most businesses adopting more of a, on this day I go to the office and on this day I work from home, a 2-3 model or a 3-2 model, depending on the day of the week. That hybrid work model is something that a lot of businesses are starting to seriously consider about how their future workforce might work.
Okay. I'm wondering, too, and maybe it's too early to tell, Spencer, but as you know, the CDC has come out with these new mask guidelines, and it probably has a lot of corporations in particular rethinking those that, I can't believe there's still some that haven't reopened the workplace, but I know there are. So for those who have not reopened, does this have them, do you think, rethinking when they're going to reopen if they were planning to do it soon?
I think both when they reopen and then how they operate in that reopened environment. So vaccinated and unvaccinated people, what happens to unvaccinated about masks? What about testing? In my business, we, in 2019 and before, we go to customer sites all over North America and visit our customers' offices. What's that going to mean for people who are in this various vaccination status? So I think we're still confused by the complexity of the new world that we're now facing. But one thing certainly for sure, businesses who are adopting and accommodating a flexible work approach, they're the ones who are attracting the best talent. And it's never been easier to change a job as it is today, because I can predominantly work from home and just work for a different organization. And I don't know the latest figures today, but last week, 9 million open jobs in the US. And that balance of power today, at least, has really shifted from employer to employee. And it's the employees who are starting to dictate how they want to work in the future.
Okay, well, that part doesn't surprise me. Whoever has the power, generally speaking, would like to wield it. And it's pretty rare in work history that employees are the ones who actually hold the power. So what are you finding is the negotiation technique that maybe some of these employees are using with their bosses that are sort of resisting the idea of completely working at home or using that work at home, come to the office a couple of days a week hybrid model? What sort of technique are they using? Are they just plain threatening to quit?
Quitting is definitely one of the levers that they're starting to pull. There's others And some of our customers at ActiveOps, we create a piece of software that helps people better manage workers who are working from the office or home. And where we see that in use by the employee is they're demonstrating to their boss that they're as productive, if not more productive, working at home as they are in the office. So it's sort of a data-driven, I can give you more output for the same wage if you allow me to work at home. And then we've got the opposite of that. We've got employers who are using some similar techniques to make sure that they get that hybrid model. So we see some employees who are providing free food on certain days of the week to try and get people back together. We've got some employees who are completely changing their real estate, and the office is no longer, banks of desks or banks of booths where people come in and just sit next to each other and work. They've created better collaboration spaces where people come to the office to meet, collaborate and innovate, and then people go home to work and do production and get their work done. So where organizations are getting that right, they've actually got a reasonable balance between that employee-employer pull. Where organizations are getting it wrong, as we just talked about, that balance of power is just going one way. It's going to the employee.
It's interesting that you should mention that, because we're in the process of, we have 5 radio stations who are part of our Houston cluster. They're all iHeart radio stations. We currently in an office building, the Galleria, that takes up 2 floors, used to take up 3 floors, takes up 2 floors. There's the usual sales cubicles and general managers' offices and air studios and all the things that go along with the broadcast facility. But we're in the process of building a new facility that is 1 floor, that is smaller than the 1 floor of the 2 floors we have now, that basically takes the sales cubicles and turns it into a couple of private little booths that any salesperson can kind of plug and play with their computer and sit down. The idea being that most of the time they're out selling anyway. They're not in the radio station. There's just a couple of studios, because we only need a couple available at any one time. Any radio station can operate out of any one of the studios. It's a whole different work model that's starting up for us, and I'm guessing you can change the application for whatever business you're in. But that seems to be the future, doesn't it?
It does, and there's always some industries that sort of stick out that you can't do that. If you're a frontline worker or you're a construction or a manufacturing, you kind of got to go to where the machinery is or where the people or patients are. But I think for the service industry, think about how we're all changing as consumers, how we interact with our bank or our insurance company, how we self-serve more. We don't ring our bank or our insurance company anymore. So we've changed as consumers, and it's time now, I think, that we change as employers. So it sounds like your company really have embraced that idea of using this time when people want to work at home. If you can get that format right of working from home and working from the office, this is a win-win. We can have more productive people who create more output for their cost of the business whilst bringing them together to create and innovate and give people that space and freedom. The number of people I've heard that have gone and calculated, I think you said some of this at the start of this discussion, but they've calculated how long they've spent commuting. And it's an unbelievable amount of downtime, non-productive time, non-value-adding time that people have spent in whatever mode of transport travelling between A to B where they don't get anything done. If we can take some of that time and do more work, and we can take some of that time and have a better lifestyle, some personal time, what a great win-win environment if businesses can get that right.
I'm talking to Spencer O'Leary from ActiveOps. They produce software. He's the CEO of ActiveOps North America, global company. They're a leader in management process automation. And in basically, Spencer, you've been telling me you can track, and this one of the biggest, I guess, concerns any company head has who's thinking about allowing any of their people work from home, let alone, adopting this on a more permanent basis, this hybrid model, is being able to track whether or not they're actually getting their work done. So without getting overly complicated, tell me how your software works. How does that help people track the productivity of their employees?
So 2 things we're tracking when we're measuring whether they're working from the office or home. Yes, we're measuring their productivity, but we're also measuring their well-being. We're looking at their general working practices through the day and monitoring to make sure that if they change, that might be a suggestion that something's changed, and therefore there's a workplace stress-related issue, and their manager can interact early. So we measure that by the way that they use their computer and the things that they do. We provide some real-time reports to managers just to help them have better conversations with their team about individual performance, whether that be productivity or well-being. So the biggest thing that we saw change through the pandemic wasn't, whilst it was very different, people working from home. The thing that really changed was managing people who were working from home. And whilst we all spent a lot of time embedding things like Teams and Zoom and collaboration tools and equipping people with laptops, once we got people working from home, it wasn't that hard. But managing people who work from home, when I was a team manager and I managed my 15 or 20 or 5,000 people, most of the time I could either see them or at some point I interacted face-to-face. We took all of those mediums away from people. Now they need to manage remotely. So at ActiveOps, we're equipping those managers who are now managing this new hybrid workforce. We're equipping them with data, some skills and a method to enable them to be better managers when they're managing in that hybrid world.
Just want to get a quick last opinion from you before we let you go, Spencer, and that's about the future of business travel. For those who used to travel on a regular basis to go meet and to sell themselves and their companies, taking trips to New York and Los Angeles and wherever they may go, is that been permanently replaced by the Zoom meeting, do you think, or do we get back to the old model of meeting in person, shaking hands, and doing the things we used to do in the world of business?
Do you know, I think we might actually go back to where we were and further, because I think one of the things that people have realized in any industry where you have a role of people who either sell or retain business is relationships. You know, people like to buy from people like them, and building those strong relationships was hard when we could do it face-to-face. It's even harder when we've tried to do it through some sort of electronic medium, Zoom or Teams. So I can see business travel getting back to where it was and possibly even extending further, that it's more expected that when you're having some sort of relationship sale with another individual, that you need to now make the time, you need to make the effort to make that in-person presence. And that could be a real help for the economy as well, if we can get people moving around and not just sitting at home and expecting the whole world to come to them on Zoom. So I think that's going to be a really interesting next 12, 18 months as we see how that shift, both in the economy and in the world of business, changes us as we all go forward.
Interesting stuff. Spencer, good to talk to you. Best of luck. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jimmy. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too.